Hello and welcome. And I'd like to wish everyone a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks for joining us. My name is Tiffany. I'm a part of Kinkly. Kinkly's mission is to promote conversations around sex, answer readers' questions, and ultimately help you all discover more about sex, your bodies, and pursuing pleasure in ways that are safe, healthy, consensual, and fun. Today, we're proud to present our webinar, Decoding Desire. This webinar is being presented by Satisfyer, a great company that we love working with. Before we get started, just a note, today's webinar is being recorded and we will send out a link to the recording shortly after the end of the live presentation, so you can listen to it at your leisure or listen to it again. We'll do our best to keep this presentation interactive, so feel free to enter your questions into the Zoom console as we go along, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenters, Megwin White and Mal Harrison. I'm very grateful to have you sit back, relax, and enjoy this webinar. With that, Megwin and Mal, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tiffany, and welcome to this presentation, a deep dive into decoding desire. This is a big topic. We're definitely not going to get to everything today, but we really do want to explore some very key high-level points in regards to desire. And with that, I'll just start with a brief introduction to myself. My name is Megwin White. I am the Director of Education at Satisfyer, and I'm also a certified clinical sexologist. And just a little note about Satisfyer. Satisfyer is a global sexual wellness brand that is focused on creating the most innovative and inclusive range of pleasure products on the market, all at accessible price points. We truly believe that every person deserves access to pleasure, regardless of gender, race, or socioeconomic background. And it's our vision to inspire joy and support a healthy sexual lifestyle for everyone at any life stage. And it's my pleasure today to introduce you to my partner on this call, Mal Harrison.
And
Mal,
partner in crime.
Woo, my partner in crime. And so just a little bio on Mal. This is a shortened version. Mal Harrison, also known as the Relationship Revitalizer, is a certified clinical sexologist, a TEDx speaker, member of the International Society for Sexual Medicine, and the executive director of the Center for Erotic Intelligence. And in 2011, her research on the internal clitoris went viral, revolutionizing the clitoris owner's understanding of how their bodies work. And if you want to know more, you can just Google her. So with that, let's go ahead and start with just breaking down some of the key points that we'll be exploring. We're going to be talking about what is libido, of course, we have to define it. And then we're going to be looking at how desire affects the brain. We could probably have a whole webinar just on this topic alone, but Mal is going to do her best to give us a sense of how desire affects the brain in different stages. And then we're going to look at the different types of desire, understanding how those different types of desire motivate us and when they might show up and how we're maybe a blend of the different types. And then we're going to be looking at the topic of what is erotic intelligence and how can erotic intelligence really support us in our quest for, gaining more empowerment around our libido and our intimate connections. And then we're going to look at how we can create incentives for desire to flourish in our lives. And of course, we're going to explore desire strategies and a lot more. So with that, let's start with looking at what exactly is libido. We use this term a lot. In terms of the definition, the classic definition of libido is the energy of the sexual drive as a component of the life instinct. Synonymous, of course, with desire, passion, eroticism, sex drive. So we typically use this term, I think, in a way that is generally referencing whether it's high or low. And there's this kind of assumption that libido has this kind of set amount, that we're kind of programmed with either a high libido or a low libido, or obviously, you know, we might recognize that it might be relative to our different experiences in life. But really, there is no widely accepted measure of what constitutes a healthy level of libido or sexual desire. So that's just something to note, that, you know, whether you're trying to figure out whether you're normal, whether you have a high or low libido, there really is no normal. But just, you know, as another interesting reference, this was a sentence that popped up with libido actually in the context of a sentence. And I thought this was interesting, that the drive behind the artist's creative activity was unsatisfied libido manifesting itself in escapist fantasy. So, you know, obviously we typically use the term libido to reference sex, but libido in a lot of ways is the undercurrent of that life force energy, that motivating drive oftentimes to create or even to exercise. So just keep that in mind as we're exploring, just to kind of broaden the scope of what libido is. And Mal, do you want to jump in here too, to just mention any like libido myths that you think would be interesting to presence, just to start?
Yeah, I mean, well, before we get to myths, I just want to discuss, add to what you were saying in terms of the definition. When I talk about the definition of eroticism, you know, it's the interplay of our daily challenges of loving and living, our interplay with conflict and desire. And so, you know, we hear the words like food porn and cloud porn, and you realize that we're really drawn to things, not just sexually, but we're drawn to music and art and food. And, you know, whether it's nature, whatever it is that we're drawn to, that pulls at us. So I really think if we broaden our idea of eroticism and perhaps libido as to the human drive and what are the motivations behind that human drive, it kind of helps us explore elements to our eroticism and our desire more, and see how that applies to our sex drive. And in terms of myths, I mean, there's so many myths out there. I would say you are absolutely normal if you have a desire discrepancy in your relationship, because all relationships are going to have a desire discrepancy at some point in time. If you're lucky enough for your relationship to last long enough for that to happen. And, you know, there's a myth that men have a higher sex drive than women. And I would say not all. You know, I think women have just as high of a sex drive, some even more than men. And I think men have just as great of a capacity to be as romantic as women. And of course, I'm speaking in a sort of heterosis normative model, which unfortunately is what a lot of the data studies. But in terms of these myths that we have in culture and society, which are based off of that model, you know, I think it's libido is fluid the same way gender is fluid, and you know, desire is also fluid. I think that brings us to our next slide. Hey. And I always ask people, I'm like, picture the sky. And people go, okay, I'm picturing the sky. And usually they picture a blue backdrop with white clouds, but they don't picture clouds moving and changing. And so our levels of desire and eroticism, and even, you know, what porn category do we want to watch, or, you know, what we're really into, or what's turning us on, or what our favorite thing is to eat this week. All of these things change through our lives. It's not a constant. So think of your desire as the clouds in the sky, the weather. It's constantly changing. It's constantly in flux. And, you know, don't be too hard on yourself if you're not where you want to be.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, we're mentioning all these, we're talking about myths about libido. So one thing that you might want to do is actually write out some of these myths. What are some of the things that you think about in relationship maybe to gender, or perhaps that have been culturally ingrained in you? Because sometimes just writing it out gives you a perspective, an understanding of like how maybe it's been influencing you. And ultimately, the more you understand yourself, the more you can evolve your desire. So with that, I think we can start talking about the brain, because this is such an important element to desire. So I'll let you take this one, Mal.
Yeah. This is just something I wish everybody was taught in whatever type of sex ed if they had it. Just if everyone were taught this when they were younger, I feel like it would make such a revolutionary change in the decisions we make in our lives. So our brains really work in a very cool way. When we're first attracted to somebody, the first stage is lust. We want them, we're driven to them, we chase them, and so lust is just the natural human sex drive. It's very primal. And then the next phase is infatuation, which oftentimes is very mixed in with a lust. But there's a specific area in the brain, the prefrontal cortex, where infatuation happens. And this is where, cocaine addiction is. This is where I smell them on the pillow they slept on. They drink from this cup. I don't want to wash it. I'm obsessed with them. I can't stop thinking about them. And it's just batshit crazy, to be honest. I mean, we are going absolutely madly, wildly in love with this person. Tom Cruise is jumping on a couch on the Oprah show. I don't know if you guys remember that, but in infatuation, and it's a lot of people mistake this feeling of infatuation for love, because it is such a powerful driver. It is such a powerful force. And so if you think about it, men die for love. Men, women, gender, non-binary, all of us humans, we kill for love. So it's a very powerful drug. It's the most natural amphetamine that our brains produce within our neurotransmitters. And then stage 3 is love, where the real work comes in. So stage 2 is usually 4 months to about 18 months, 3 years if you're lucky, if maybe you're having an affair or you have a long distance relationship. Those neurotransmitters keep juicy, keep going. But stage 3 happens in the hippocampus, and that's where the most natural opiates are produced in our brain. So we go from this crazy high of excitement and drive to contentment and just calm. And a lot of people think when they reach stage 3 that they've fallen out of love because they don't have that crazy high anymore. And so we call them romance junkies, and they just go from relationship to relationship, wearing out that infatuation stage. But the stage 3 is where the real work happens. And it's also where a lot of times our sex lives go kaput, and where we have to put in the actual work of maintaining desire and keeping things hot. So, if you're at stage 3, it doesn't mean you're not in love with your partner. It just means you have to put in the extra effort.
Yeah, and it changes. And, this whole idea of the conflation of love and infatuation is so deeply ingrained in our culture. And it's hard to unplug from that, and I think obviously, like you said about the romance junkies, it's something that we get sort of affirmed, I think, oftentimes when we're in that stage of infatuation. And so, yeah, having a better sense of what that is and how it is different from love. And that actually is something that we would love to do a webinar on probably in the future, to kind of really break
cool.
it down. So let's go ahead and now transition to the different types of desire, because we tend to think about spontaneous desire, and this is the type of desire that's most present in those first 2 stages. This is the kind of desire where you just want to rip your clothes off. You want to take your partner. It's this urge you can't hold back. And this is, of course, what we would consider a high libido, right? Like if someone has this type of desire, and obviously this kind of desire shows up when our hormones are raging as well. So, oftentimes when we're adolescents or, different stages in our life. But then there's also another type of desire, which I think everyone that's listening can relate to at some stage, most likely, is the idea of responsive desire. And this has to do with touch, and how touch can actually help drive us to being open, to being more sensually intimate. It might start with something like a hug and a little whisper, or it might start with a little gentle massage to the feet, or, some kind of touch that helps to facilitate and motivate desire.
Or
Um,
even a text or a naughty email.
yeah, no, that's a really good point, because we are living in this new age of the digital, and touch doesn't have to necessarily be always physical, but you're 100% right. I think that is connected as well to responsive desire, or even being creatively inspired. But that also may fall a little bit more into our third, which is contextual desire, which does have a little bit more to do with that sort of psychological pull. Oftentimes the context around your specific connection, maybe there's something really kind of weird, that what other people might consider weird, that turns you on about your partner. Perhaps it's a particular kink, that you have, or, it's a setting, it's a place, maybe there's a particular place that really turns you on, that you really want to have sex in. And that, of course, can be a huge motivator for, connecting sensually. But we don't always see these things. I think these are the contextual layers. If we're not exploring our fantasies, if we're not really deep diving into who we are as sexual beings, we may not be as aware of these contextual influences. And ultimately, we're mostly a blend. I would say everyone, maybe there's one particular type of desire that you feel like you are more of, and that's fine. But most of the people that I do meet are kind of a blend of these three. And, is there anything else that you want to mention about the three different types of desire, Mal, before we move on?
Yeah, I would say, in terms of responsive desire, I hear a lot about couples struggling with who initiates and how the other responds. And I would say, if somebody tries to initiate rather than instantly saying, no, I'm not in the mood, wait and see if you can get into the mood. Be open to it. Be willing to see, well, you can say, I'm not in the mood now, but I might be willing to see if I could get there. Let's try massage. Let's try, making out for a few minutes, whatever it may be. And then in terms of contextual, it's really, that's just could be its own thing on its own. It's
Right.
a
Yeah.
whole subject.
Right.
But the erotic equation is attraction plus obstacle. Um, equals vibrancy.
Yeah.
And so as long as you have equals desire equals that drive. And so it's interesting how when there's an obstacle, when there's you can't have the thing you want, it drives you to it more. So that's why affairs are so hot. They're so naughty. That's why doing anything naughty or taboo is so hot. And also when you're in that stage 3 of love, when you do anything with your long-term partner that's a little bit dangerous, or when you go on a trip together and you're exploring doing something new, those set the contextual layers to provoke desire, because you're out of your element. So I think that's something fun. Just a random tip,
Yeah,
anything you can yeah, anything you can do that's novel, that's new, that's exploratory, even if it's to get a new toy, something that's pushing your own boundaries outside of the sexual realm, you'll find it causes you to reignite with the sexual realm.
Yeah, 100%. Love that. Let's talk about some of the barriers to desire, right? These are like the non-starters. This is the stuff that happens that is just kind of completely derail desire, and that we need to remember, and not shame ourselves when it does happen. Starting with an emotional or physical traumatic event. Maybe someone died in the family, or an accident happened, something that is obviously needs to be focused on and emotionally processed. And oftentimes, we're not going to be available for desire when those things come up.
Even childbirth, just
Yeah.
FYI, that can, your hormones, everything, your body's gone through a trauma. So I think that's the place where we can have compassion towards ourselves and our partners.
Mm-hmm. and hormonal changes. Hormonal changes can happen really at any point for anyone. Sometimes it's, depending on, let's say, woman's cycle, but it also could be hormonal changes that are also happening based on health factors as well, or, different life stages that we're going through. So, hormones do have an influence and they can impact desire. And then medication. I think this is like a really important one, because sometimes I think in the medical world, they're not always thinking about sex. And so you may not know that things like antidepressants or antipsychotics, these kind of medications can often inhibit sexual arousal. Anything else that you want to mention about medications that I may be not presenting?
I think you nailed it. Honestly, like the hormonal changes, menopause is something we don't talk a lot about. For men as well, they experience low testosterone throughout their life stages. And then sometimes the medications that we use to help negate some of those problems have the opposite effect than what they were meant to do. So it's and even supplement, yeah.
Hypertension, yeah, a lot of different things. So, when you do get prescribed medication, that's a good thing to ask your doctor, just to have a sense of. And it's okay if it does derail your desire for some time, but it's something that you do want to know about. And then kind of started touching upon this, but any kind of medical condition, sometimes, if there's any type of heart condition, that can, of course, impede sexual arousal. But even a lot of weight gain can sometimes get in the way of feeling desire. But this one is one that is so, of course, relative to each person, but again, something to keep in mind. And or an injury, spinal injury, can affect sexual, certainly sexual performance, maybe not always desire, because again, desire is in the brain, but it can impact our experience of our desire. So
Yeah, and definitely like body image issues, I feel
yeah.
can be, a barrier. Our internal dialogue, the way we talk to ourselves about ourselves and our experiences, um, which is where
Yeah.
sensual current actually fits in nicely with that, because, the narrative we have running through our heads really is responsible for how much erotic charge we have, whether that's about ourselves, our partners, or life at large, how much we allow culture to influence us in terms of owning our sexuality or our sensuality. So sensual current, foreplay does not start with a kiss, oral sex, intercourse, orgasm, you're done. Foreplay starts at the very end of the last orgasm, and it's in, a text, it's in a brush of hand through the hair, it's in a touch of the butt when you're walking past them. It's there's so much sensual current that you can bring to your daily life that's so imperative, especially when you're going through some of these things that Megwin just mentioned in terms of stress even is a barrier to desire, or traumas or medication, etc. Just being able to keep that sensual current alive. I like to make pervy puns all the time. It, and it's in your brain, and then you're the haptic expert. You have so much information about somatic awareness. I would love to hear your input on the sensual current with regards to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fun to use just subtle forms of touch to connect with your partner, to bring out that sensual current. So I, like you, consider it to be happening all day long. So with my partner, I love to make sounds and kiss the cheek and really indulge in every single erotic experience as though it was a sexual act, right? Because how do we even, what do we consider sex? Really, there is no universal definition of what sex is, unless we're only equating it with that heteronormative view of, let's say, penis and vagina. But we know that there are so many variables when it comes to what we would consider sex. So recently I've been thinking about, what if sex is just penetrating erotically another person's energetic space, like their physical space, and how we kind of play within that. It doesn't always have to end in a particular act or even orgasm. So, with that kind of leads us into something that does happen in relationship to um, desire discrepancy, especially in relationships. So you have one partner that, is really wanting sex, and another partner that maybe is not so into it. So what happens is there's this sexual bargaining that occurs. So I'll have sex with you if you wash the dishes. I'll have sex with you if you finally take the dog out, or if you do that for the whole week, right? There's all this kind of bargaining that occurs. And that, again, that's up to people's personal choice of how they want to explore that. But I think that what happens sometimes, if we are using sexual bargaining, we tend to then only equate that sexual energy in a very particular box. And oftentimes resentments can form. We end up resenting not only our partner, but we resent the act itself. And so then we don't end up having that sort of natural relationship to that erotic sensual current. So I think really what we're trying to say is that if you prime a sensual current in your life, you're going to have the abundance of that eroticism. You're going to have more than enough to be able to share, to keep that that energy moving. And if you start thinking about it as in that way, it can really, really help to support your relationship. And so the reasons why people have sex, there are so many. Here are just a few. There was actually a study done, I think it was in 2010, on the 237 reasons why people have sex. They actually found 237 reasons that were, common. And so these are just a few, just take a gander at this list, notice, wow, that was a motivator for me at one point. That, to have amazing orgasms might have been a motivator at a different time. Maybe you wanted to make your partner jealous. This is a common thing. This actually does happen. So, it's not always obvious, and it's not always based just on libido, right? There are other factors that are oftentimes motivating us to have sex.
I would even say, just on the opposite end of making someone jealous, compersion, the
Right. Yeah.
experience of seeing your partner have pleasure,
Mhm.
which is something that is discussed in the poly world and non-consensual my tongue is tangled, consensual non-monogamy.
No, totally. So yeah, again, write down some of your reasons why you have sex, and just, again, just have an awareness of that. And oftentimes what you'll see in a lot of these responses is that it's sometimes tied to an emotional need, a need for an ego boost, for instance, or a
Yeah,
need
one of
for connection.
Yeah, one of the things I see a lot with clients, with everybody really that I've worked with, is that a lot of times we're having sex to meet needs that aren't necessarily sexual. Like, of course, we love orgasms, we love pleasure, we love connection, we love intimacy. But, there are some people who have sex to numb out because they're going through something very stressful or traumatic. There are some people who have sex to feel a validation. I would say there's no such thing as emotionless sex because I think there's a very cis male idea of I had no emotions, I'm tough. But you know what? You're still feeling pleasure. You're still feeling power or validation or affirmation. I would say the two things we always feel during consensual sex is self affirmation and self validation.
Mhm.
So if we look at, why we're having sex at any given moment, if we, and I'm not saying do this all the time because sometimes you just want to sit back and enjoy yourself. You don't want to psychoanalyze yourself all day. But if we look at, why are we doing that to have these needs met? I know one that shows up a lot for the women X I work with is I want to feel desired. And unfortunately, our culture has really ingrained in a lot of us that our self-worth is based on our desirability. So that's something that we all must work to unpack every day, and work on loving ourselves, and realize that we have a lot more to offer the world than just our desirability. But there are just so many undercurrents and needs that we're looking to have met in terms of why we have sex.
Mhm. Yeah, very well said. I'm really glad you mentioned that. So we can go into now your favorite topic.
Erotic intelligence. Yeah. So how can we use all of these things we've talked about, and bring to light a greater vitality to our eroticism, to our lives in general, just this feeling of being alive. And so I would say there are 5 ingredients to erotic intelligence. And there's my hand. And if all the ingredients are a hand, self-awareness is the thumb. Self-awareness is the one that makes all the other ingredients really, really work well. You have to be aware of, well, today I'm at this place in my cycle, so maybe I really feel like having sex, or maybe I don't. Or today I'm, reacting to something that happened at work, or an email I got, and being aware that I'm maybe not being my best self because inside I'm dealing with something. It could be that simple. It could be something bigger. So self-awareness is really just one of the biggest, greatest key elements. And it's not something you just wake up and have. It's something that we must work on cultivating 24/7, all the time, thinking about if we want to engage in with the world around us with self-awareness. Social intelligence would be the next ingredient. And that's really the ability to pick up on subtle cues, body language. Is somebody comfortable? Are they not uncomfortable? Being able to read a room, being able to read an audience, being able to, interact with the person you're talking to. And we've all made flubs, we've all done something that's offended somebody, and we make mistakes and we learn. But social intelligence really is, being able to just have a conversation with a stranger and it flow and be natural. It's a wonderful skill to have, especially on first dates and second dates. Emotional intelligence. Now, this is a key. All of these ingredients are keys for vitality in all arenas of our life, not just in the bedroom. But I would say emotional intelligence in terms of, sex, like what happens when you lose an erection, or you start your period during sex, or you fart, or you queef. These things happen. How do you handle it? Do you have the emotional intelligence to laugh it off, to, say something to deal with it? Because we're all human. It happens to the best of us. So I think, emotional intelligence is one that, if we think about how can we cultivate it in our daily lives, and then think about how could we apply it to our sex lives, it might make some, awkward moments less awkward. And then body attunement. How in tune with with your body are you? Are you able to explore your body? Do you know what positions help you orgasm best, or what positions you like the best? Are you willing to explore? Do you know what types of toys you like using? I just gave birth a few months ago, so I'm a big fan of Satisfyer's Kegel balls, and I know getting back into shape is super important. So I love the Satisfyer brand, and I'm not just saying that, because they really have tools to help you explore your body and get in tune. And that's super important in terms of communicating with our partners' social intelligence. And then creative imagination would be the 5th ingredient. And that is just the ability to see the same person every day with a new lens, or even the same place. I always say New York City taught me everything I needed to know about a long-term relationship. I've lived here for 21 years, and I can't wait to leave her and have a break. And I really can't wait to come back to her. And there's always a new part of her to explore. I don't take her for granted. I think it was 10 years I had lived here, and I finally went to the top of the Empire State Building. There's just always something around a new corner. Even with the shutdown, there's always something new to explore. So can we kind of apply that same idea to our partner? Because as much as we think we know our partners, there's still some mystery there. And if we hold space for that mystery, and look for that mystery, and kind of imbibe in that mystery a little bit, it helps rev up the excitement and the desire that we have. So that's my spiel on the EI.
Yeah, and I like thinking about it as the different fingers. I was thinking how funny it was that if self-awareness is the thumb and emotional intelligence is the middle finger, you definitely don't want the middle finger hanging out by itself, right? You have to have all the other ingredients. So, and metaphors.
Yeah, I'm not I haven't thought of a funny pun for fisting or hand jobs with that yet, but we'll get there.
So, let's talk too about attention. So this is actually a chart from a book called Mind the Gap by Dr. Karen Gurney. And it just kind of shows a sort of example of how we place our attention when we're engaging in a sensual act can actually impact our desire. So this is a graph that shows it in a positive way. So for instance, if you're experiencing pleasurable sensations, if you're able to bring your attention, let's say, to your vulva, which is throbbing, to just feeling the desire for touch for a particular part of your body, feeling juicy, right? Feeling juicy in your body and indulging in that attention, which might seem obvious, like, oh, of course you're experiencing pleasure, but it's not always so obvious, right? We actually have to practice this kind of attention. And then, of course, positive erotic thoughts, thinking about, perhaps how your partner looks, how they're breathing, the movement of their pelvis, just getting turned on by their juiciness. And then in the back of your mind, you might be having some unpleasant sensations. Maybe the bed is a little hard, or it's squeaking, or there's something going on that is kind of impeding a little bit slightly on those pleasurable sensations. And then also just negative thoughts and distractions, thinking about maybe what you have to do after you have sex. Maybe you forgot to do something, you forgot to wash the laundry, and that's kind of in the back of your mind. But if it's in the back of your mind and it's not overriding these other areas, you can have a really great experience. And so if we look at it maybe from a more negative standpoint, this isn't a scenario where your attention is derailing your desire. So maybe you have a lot of negative thoughts and distractions. Maybe there was just something horrible that happened at work, and it's literally you're playing the scene out in your mind as your partner is connecting to you. Maybe you're noticing that you have a cramp in your calf, or some type of unpleasant sensation that is completely distracting you from any pleasure. And maybe just you have a few positive erotic thoughts. You're thinking, oh, I really want to like this. And maybe you are feeling some amount of pleasure. But again, these unpleasant sensations and negative thoughts are kind of overriding the experience. And so it's just helpful to kind of, again, get that self-awareness of what's going on in our own brains so that we can practice. If it's for you, maybe you don't have as much capacity to put attention on pleasurable sensations. So maybe masturbation is a good practice to explore. Or maybe it has to do with erotic thoughts, maybe exploring erotica, or getting into your fantasies. That could be a really great way to cultivate that. And of course, mindfulness, being able to bring your attention onto these things does require some amount of discipline, in a way, not in a scary way,
I would definitely add, one of the techniques I use with clients is to have a mantra. So mindfulness is so important, because all of us at some point or another have awkward sex where it's like, oh man, I haven't showered. Like, what's going on? Did I shave? What are they going to think? And it took me like a lot of years of being very promiscuous to be like, they don't care. Like, they're super excited that we're about to have these explosions. It's fine. But there were many years there where it was, and not to say they don't care, I'm going to be nasty, but just to say, like, a lot of the stuff that we get really worked up about and really insecure and worried and self-conscious about is, in our own heads, so much bigger than what it actually is. And so one of the techniques that I teach people is to have a go-to mantra. So when you start thinking, oh my gosh, is he seeing that pimple on my ass, or does she think this about, my body hair, or this or that? what's your go-to mantra? I deserve this pleasure. I feel really good. I feel in my body. It could just be the same sentence and you say that to yourself over and over and over again. And I think that's just such an important strategy for everyone to have when they do get into that negative internal dialogue spiral.
Mhm.
And the other thing I would say, just in terms of keeping sex fun, that kind of pertains to this, and keeping sex vibrant, is to have a lot of maintenance sex. Because if you have a sex life where you stop having sex for a long stretch and then you have sex again, a lot of times, even if you've been married a really long time, that can make sex super awkward. It's like, oh, we haven't done this, we're not in practice. So it's important to have the maintenance sex. It's like going to the gym, scheduling the time you're going to go to the gym. Maybe you don't want to do it, you don't feel like it. I've heard plenty of people tell me they don't feel like going to the gym, but I've never heard somebody tell me they regret going to the gym. So I really feel like, if you can have that maintenance sex, then that's going to enable the really hot, fun, spontaneous sex to happen when it does. So as boring and silly
Well,
as it sounds, schedule it.
yeah, and I guess one other thing that I would add to that is that expand your notion of what sex is. So maybe you explore maintenance sex as you want to give your partner a prostate massage. Perhaps you want to explore giving your partner a breast massage. Like actually experimenting with focusing on very specific erotic types of acts where you're engaging in an experience of learning, and you're kind of getting outside the bounds of what you typically do. Can be another way to also kind of tune things up. I love the car metaphor, of being able to maintain everything in working order. You got to keep it tuned up. So with that, we can move also into desire strategies. There are so many strategies. Again, we're not going to be able to touch upon everything, but we are going to try to give you a few different ideas. So the first one is a really simple framework, is to kind of get a sense of where a desire barometer, getting a sense of where your desire is at. So thinking about it in terms of a number between 1 and 10, 10 being, you're really ready to go, you're ready to take your clothes off, you're ready to jump right in and you can't control yourself. And 1 being like, oh my God, I can't even think about sex. So asking your partner or even yourself, if you don't have a partner, just random times in the day, asking yourself, where is my desire at? And just allow a number to come forward. Don't think about it too much. Your body knows. This is another great way to get a better relationship with your body, and also to better understand your partner and your relationship, and how that desire can vacillate. It can be a really, really great feedback tool as well. And then, of course, masturbation and fantasy, which, Satisfier is very, very good at helping to support this. And I think it's so key, again, coming back to those principles that you spoke about, Mal, in terms of self-awareness, emotional intelligence. I think the erotic intelligence as a whole, in a lot of ways, can be explored and nourished through masturbation and giving ourselves permission to have pleasure, just like we talked about maintenance sex. We also need maintenance, self-pleasure, exploration. And that goes along with fantasy as well, that you can also have one without the other. You can explore fantasy just through your mind, but really creating that time and space to indulge in your own experience of pleasure can be incredibly nurturing and really help to motivate your desire.
One of the things I always say is the best way to love yourself is to give yourself a little loving. So masturbation is where it's at, just to get to know your body, and even through the changes throughout your life, whether it's a medical condition or hormonal or stress or whatever it is. And I also kind of look at masturbation as a form of meditation. When I'm having a really shitty day, I'm just like, let me go rub one off, because it releases tension. So I think if we think of masturbation as more than this dirty thing, and really a key to self health and self love. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful tool.
Yeah, it's a way to regulate our nervous systems and to connect with our bodies in a positive way, and and a sense of wholeness as well. Like our sexual parts are literally at the root of our bodies, and just like we would nurture the roots of plant, we need to also nurture the roots of our sexuality.
I
And
love that.
yeah, and so with that, we're just going to highlight our lovely Wonder Woman here, which is a fabulous tool for helping to, of course, for exploring masturbation, but also as a way to really connect with the continuum of desire as it exists in your body. So a fun little framework, if you have one of these, is to just tune in and notice maybe where you feel yourself disconnecting in your body. So for me, I sometimes find that it's in my legs. So what I will sometimes do with the Wonder Woman is I'll literally turn it on and I will just start to vibrate into my thighs, and I'll allow my body to move, especially exploring different kind of spirals of movement. And if I do that, I start to feel more connected, more grounded, and in relationship with that sensual current. But you can explore this in the joints, in the back, in the neck. Of course, it's an incredible foreplay tool, but as we mentioned before, foreplay isn't just that little time right before orgasm. It exists. It exists throughout the day and throughout your experience. But definitely check this out. And then, so to close, Mel, why don't you lead us in a little thought-provoking exercise here?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to ask everybody to think about what does sex mean to you? Is it simply this thing you do, a need to get off, like a need to eat, or is it a journey that you go upon? I like to think of sex and masturbation as an erotic exploratory journey. Um, is sex something confining and scary, or is it exhilarating and liberating? Do you use it as reward, punishment, or manipulation? Does it give you power, connection, or maybe even both? Do you think of sex as something you get, something you give up, or something you share? What place does sex have in your life now, and what place would you like it to have? And I think these are just super imperative questions for all of us to think about, for greater self awareness and really to meet our needs.
Mm-hmm. Very, very well spoken. So thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been a really, really fun conversation. It's so great to have you here today with us, Mel, and I'm sure we're going to do more of these. So thanks again to Kinkly for creating this platform, for creating this space for us to share this information. If there's questions that you guys have, regarding anything that we've shared or things that maybe popped up as you were listening, please feel free to go ahead and send them to us. You can send them also anonymously as well, and we'll go ahead and do our best to answer your questions.
Yes, thank you, Megan and Mal. As Megan was explaining, now is the time for the Q&A portion of the presentation. If you have any questions, please share them with us through the Zoom console. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. And feel free to make use of Zoom's anonymous feature if that makes you feel more comfortable. With that, let's get started with the first question. I have one here who asks, I used to have a high libido, but not anymore. And now there's a larger difference between my partner's libido and my level. What are some ways that we can address this as partners?
Yeah, I mean, well, of course, we're not in a dyad right now in terms of knowing some of the undercurrents within your relationship and what exactly is going on. But I think first, like we just asked the question about sex, really starting with that, getting a better sense of what exactly does sex mean to both of you right now, how having more sex would impact your life, like, in a positive, or maybe you have negative ideas of how it might impact, like kind of getting all of that on the table so that you, again, get a clear sense of where you both are coming from. And then, once you have that addressed, starting to create the context for you both to engage sensually. So whether that's having a date to explore a sensual massage or exploring a particular fantasy, like creating a space for you both to receive a win in relationship to what your needs are, I think is a really great way to start. I'm sure Mal has a lot to add as well to this.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Meg, when you had an idea when we were chatting through this about the desire jar, which
Yeah.
was a cool idea. But I would, and I'll let you riff on that in a sec, but I would also say mutual masturbation, or one person masturbating and the other person watching or giving a massage, or just being a part, the one who has the higher libido, being a part of it, talking, through sex with fantasy, or talking through what you might want to do to your partner as they masturbate. And the one with the lower libido, who knows, maybe talking through a masturbation session with your partner might actually ignite some desire within you, and it could end up in sex. Another idea would be to write each other, have an email account and write each other emails back and forth, where you just start an erotic story, and kind of see how worked up you can get outside of the context of, we're naked, we're physical, or we're just physical. Really start it in the mind. I think that type of lubrication, the mental lubrication, is very helpful in terms of igniting our libidos. And also, if you have a low libido, if somebody has nothing's wrong with you, like I said, it's completely normal to have discrepancies. It's just finding ways to meet each other's needs, in an equitable way. And sometimes the hottest moments in our relationships aren't equitable. Maybe there's a way to play with power in terms of this. Maybe there's a way to play um, with inequality that could make this hot for one and fun for the other. Who knows?
Yeah, and then also looking for those opportunities for those sensual current moments. Like maybe there's a way, like maybe there's some physical acts that your partner would love to experience from you that are lower hanging fruits, if you will, things that you can do to share, that kind of contribute to that erotic energy. And just kind of maybe you're because we're not so used to having conversations about this, just bringing that up can be a really great way to start bridging those connections, and perhaps even supporting that responsive desire, as we were talking about earlier. One thing might lead to another thing. Like even if you decide, let's have a cuddle session where we just cuddle, on the bed, and you never know where cuddling can go, but just starting it off like that can be a better way in than let's have sex, because that all of a sudden feels like, oh my God, I have to really be on for this. It's like a big deal. Another random thing is that, they have these great little card games for couples. This one happens to be in relationship to love language, but you can look for this kind of game on Amazon or just, on the internet. And those are really great thought starters for, kind of lubricating the desire in the mind and to get to know your partner as well. But yeah, I think, that last element of erotic intelligence, creative energy, is something that I think is very important for long-term couples to really, really connect with throughout their relationship. It's such an essential ingredient, and it does take practice. So.
Great, thank you both. I have a question here about mantras. Earlier you had mentioned mantras. Should those be said internally or externally when practicing?
Definitely internally, because imagine having sex with somebody who keeps repeating the same phrase. So I would stick with internal.
Got it, thank you. I have a question here from Megan, who asks, do you think it's possible to work through and overcome medication side effects of low libido without stopping the medication?
Hmm. Well, that's a good question, really. I think definitely you have to talk with your medical doctor, but I think why not? It's oftentimes we're under assumptions that we can't have something. I think it's really important to get, of course, that information from your doctor who's prescribing you the medicine, but to just, as a caveat, just to know that it's not always so predetermined, that there are these variables, but don't put the pressure on yourself. And again, think about libido not always just within relationship to the sexual energy, but also in relationship to your creative output, to your connection to the world, and to masturbation doesn't always have to be touching your genitals. It can be, connecting in a healthy way to your body, and all of those things can really contribute to supporting your libido.
Yeah, for sure. It's such it's a case by case situation. So I don't think it's something that an answer can be easily given to. But if, I would definitely try a lot of things in the toolkit first, such as getting more in tune with your body, masturbation, fantasy, exploring different types of, and when I say exploring fantasy, it could even be, reading erotic stories. It could be watching porn. It could be a lot of things. And seeing if there's a reaction in your body. And if it doesn't feel like there's a reaction happening in your body, go, it's so cliche, but like turn off your phone, get rid of all distractions, go take a bubble bath, and just relax into your body and see what you could just do just by tickling yourself. And really see what you can enliven within your physical realm. But it is a really tough situation. Sometimes switching medications, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not here to give you medical advice whatsoever. But there are other options if you do speak to your doctor about it. I have worked with clients who've switched medications and it's helped. I've worked with other people where, it's a cost benefits ratio that you have to analyze. Is it sometimes the medication is so needed that you need to stay on the medication, and it takes even more work to work on how do I engage with my body and my partner sexually. So my heart is with you.
Mm.
Thank you. And we have one more question here from Jeff, who says, my partner has another partner, and they did things with that partner that they won't do with me. Is there something I could be doing? They won't discuss it with me. Is there any way that we can open up that discussion?
I would ask, what is it is this driving you so crazy that you need to know what it was that they did? Why is it that you want to know what it was that they did, and why is it that she's not sharing it? That's my first question in context with this, because maybe she just feels, or I'm assuming it's a she, maybe it's a he. Maybe that partner feels so much shame around the act and doesn't want to discuss it. So there's so much contextual stuff here that I want to know the why do you want to know everything, and maybe utilizing not knowing could create some mystery, could maintain desire. It sounds like this is the obstacle that's driving some of the attraction. um so you could play around, you could be flirtatious, but honestly I would not obsessively go crazy over this or drive it, or you're going to end up pushing your partner away.
Mm.
Right. And we'll do one more question here from Beth, who asked, any tips for heterosexual couples where the woman does have a higher desire, spontaneous and responsive, and the male seems to shy away from discussing her sex life? I feel like because he's so invested in the belief that sex is all I want or think about, that my needs or emotional hurt aren't serious.
Yeah, I would ask him to really start thinking about sex out of the realm of penetration and the act that you do. And because you can, sex is so woefully truncated into that order I described before: kissing and foreplay and intercourse and orgasm. You could masturbate on his leg. You could, do so many things with him to please yourself. Granted, what you want is him to take you seriously and to take your needs seriously. But have these conversations outside of the bedroom for sure, and say, I feel like I have needs that I have places in my life where I need you, and I feel like you're not taking me seriously. What are your thoughts on that? And really just bridge that conversation. Why don't you take this seriously? I'm not a deviant. I'm not, obsessed with sex. I'm obsessed with connecting with you physically
Right.
and intimately. And I really want to be with you and share myself with you fully. So how can we do that together? What do you propose? And, put that on him. What does he propose to connect physically if he, doesn't want to dive into sex? And he could have some issues that he's not willing to talk about. There's a lot of, I work with erectile dysfunction, not to say your partner has that, but I work with a lot of people who struggle with that. And one of the things that we see often are that men who take Viagra, it works when they're having random sex with strangers, but when it's with somebody they love, it's very hard for them to connect. And even with the medication, it's not working. And a lot of times that has to do with self-worth. So regardless of, ED or not, there could be some issues of self-worth, of self-esteem, of body image happening that he just hasn't told you. And so rather than taking responsibility for his own shame or issues around sex, he just puts it off on you as if like, well, you're just, you're obsessed and you're sex obsessed. And, that might not be the case. So see what you can uncover there and dig a little deeper.
Yeah, and it sounds like whatever this polarity is maybe also there's a lot of energy. There's a potential breakthrough within this particular topic for you guys. That often with any relationship, there's like these different layers, there's these different barriers, and it is kind of tied to that erotic quotient that you mentioned, Mal. And I think that leading into that as with curiosity, and not just like looking at it as a problem, but that this is actually this opportunity underneath this issue that we're having is actually an opportunity to understand each other more deeply. So, kind of presenting it in that way also can help.
Great, thank you. With that final question, that brings today's webinar to a close. Thanks to all who attended. We hope you had a blast, and thanks to Megwin, Mal, and Satisfier for sharing your time and expertise. Megwin and Mal, if you have any last words.
Thanks so much for having me. And I noticed in the chat, somebody asked for advice for somebody who's experienced a miscarriage, and I would be happy to email you. So if you want to reach out on my website, we can chat. And obviously, I'll just give you some thoughts and some input for free, obviously, because my heart goes out to you, and that's a big deal. So I hope you got the message there.
Yeah, and I just want to say another thank you, again to Mal and to everybody that has been watching today. This is a vulnerable topic, and I feel like we just scratched the surface today. There's so much more to explore around this, but hopefully you can take some of what we've shared, do some journaling, do some introspection, and share this with those that you love as well. It can be really helpful to share with others. And thanks again to Kinkley for providing us the space.
Yes, thank you, Mal and Megwin. As we mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out a link to the recording shortly. If you have any further questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach Kinkley at webmaster@kinkley.com. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.